I recently began my journey into the world of artificial intelligence by attempting to take paintings of the earliest US presidents who were never photographed, or where the photograph is lost, and convert those paintings into more photorealistic likenesses. I'd previously spent around 200 hours manually restoring and colouring images of the photographed presidents, so I felt this would be a nice way to add to and enhance that existing project. In this video, I'll be documenting the working methods I use to generate those images in AI. I will quickly say, while I'll be talking through my complete process, this is not a tutorial. The painting I used for this demonstration video is Painting of a Lady by Daniel F. Amis. It is a watercolour painted in around 1850. I'll link it below. The first stage for me was to crop down this image to a resolution of 512 by 512 pixels. One of the biggest limitations of the AI world at this moment is that you generally have to work with relatively small images for anything outside of a supercomputer to be able to handle it. Along with cropping the image, I also cleaned up any elements that I didn't want to be in my final generated image. You can see here that I removed the remaining parts of the picture frame and repaired her dress using Photoshop's Content-Aware Fill function. With that done, I brought the image into Stable Diffusion's image-to-image mode. Image-to-image allows you to use a reference picture to influence your AI-generated image. I also loaded the same image into ControlNet in OpenPose mode. ControlNet can do some fascinating things, like use your reference image's depth for a generated image, or turn a scribble into a full piece of art. Here, however, I just wanted to make sure that this woman's same pose would be used for our generated image. The next stage is to give a text description, or a prompt, to Stable Diffusion, so it can understand what it is that we want to generate. We can also add negative prompts so that it understands what we don't want to see in our generated image. With all that in place, we generate our first set of images. I say our first set as it would require tremendous luck to get a perfect image generated on your first attempt. We don't know exactly how the AI will interpret our prompt and reference image, and it's typically common to make adjustments as needed before generating more iterations of the image. Based on this first set of draft images, I can see that I forgot to say that I wanted the woman to be smiling slightly, as she was in the original painting, so I added that to the prompt. I also ended up having to change the text prompt to specify that the woman should look around 20 years old. With those changes made, these newly generated images were far closer to what I needed them to be. I copied the first generated image into Photoshop with the intention of using it as a basis for her dress. At this current point in time, at least for this kind of project, you find yourself having to stitch together multiple generated images to get the elements that you want from each. I also really liked this face that was generated, however, I needed it to be in full colour. While I could have manually coloured this image, and that would generally be the better option for strictly preserving accurate historical information, in this case I was only looking to use her face for my final image. Therefore, Photoshop's AI neural colouring will do an excellent job of colouring that part of this image for me. I made tutorials for using both Photoshop's Neural Restoration and Neural Colorize if you're interested, they'll be linked below. I then began the stages of combining together the different AI generated images. I always feel a little embarrassed showing my working methods for projects, as I tend to be very chaotic, trying and failing at multiple things until the image suddenly starts to come together. Here you can see me removing some of the layering on the sleeve to make it match the original painting more closely. I also made sure to bring back in the original dress for now, as the AI generated versions of the dress are drastically different to the original one as painted. They lack the buttons, for example, and the original dress is far more form-fitting and smooth. Here you can again see me using Content-Aware Fill to replace the background around her hair. I also recoloured the hair and smoothed out any differences between the AI images and aligned the generated image to better match the original painting. My goal with any historically focused work I do is accuracy when possible, so I made sure to bring her original hair shape and earrings back in from the original painting for now. Much of this stage involved blending together the generated elements to get them to fit together as seamlessly as possible. It was important to get the newly generated dress sleeve to match the rest of the dress, for example. To make further corrections, I asked Stable Diffusion to make the dress both smoother and to add buttons to it. I ended up really liking this image. It wouldn't have been as easy to give me this small adjustment if I hadn't used Photoshop to act as a workflow stage to do the heavy lifting. And back into Photoshop to fix the hair. I could do this fairly easily by taking the hair on the left-hand side of the head and then duplicating it to the right. I again brought back the large buttons from the painted dress also. I generally like to use the painted elements unless I can generate a more visually appropriate version of them. I also brought back the hairline, earrings, and whatever this is, a headband? And with that we went back, yet again, to Stable Diffusion with our new version of this image as an input source. You can see me gradually reducing the level of denoising as we go on. As the image gets closer and closer to what I want it to be, I need Stable Diffusion to make less changes to it. As you can see, I finally have some buttons that I'm happy with. Now the only two remaining things I really wanted to change were the headband and the earrings. Thankfully, Stable Diffusion has a feature called InPaint, where you can feed it an image and paint in masking for the parts of the image that you either wish to change or retain. Given that I'm working with only parts of the image and protecting the rest of it, I can massively shorten the prompt. However, with Stable Diffusion not generating the results that I wanted, I attempted to make the hairband more visually clear in a hope that the AI would be able to identify it more easily. Whatever I tried, I just couldn't get this part of the image how I wanted it to be. So I accepted that the headband would remain an element which was there from the original painting. With the image approaching the final stages, I went back into Photoshop to do probably the most important stage. In order to bring as much character from the original painting as possible back to the newly generated image, I used Photoshop's Liquify tool to drag parts of the AI generated image around to better match the original image. I also corrected the eye colour to make it match the painting more closely. Now at this point I believed the image was finished, so I decided to blur the background to give the image more of a photographic feeling. To do this, I created a version of the background with no subject, again using content-aware fill, and then cut out the woman and placed her above the blurred new background. This is the point in the project where things started to go a little wrong. I intended to export the image from Photoshop again and use Stable Diffusion to upscale the image from 512 by 512 resolution, but the results from that looked pretty terrible. I actually had to regenerate the entire image with minimal changes via image to image in order to fix a lot of the issues. Eventually the skin and face looked pretty good, as did the clothes for the most part. The earrings, headband and brooch were completely destroyed however. How much of this was caused by me working badly with the AI and how much was AI defects that I just didn't notice until they were upscaled, I'm not sure. However, I now had new things to fix again. I decided to take the image into Photoshop's beta version. Partially this was just so I could repair a few visual issues in Photoshop, but it was also as the Photoshop beta version comes with their new AI generative fill tool. Basically you can highlight part of an image, type a prompt, much like in Stable Diffusion, and then Photoshop will generate a very high quality element for your image. As you can see, while it can produce very high quality elements, the ability to generate what you have actually asked for is a little imprecise at the moment. This feature is still very much in beta, and certainly when it works well, it's incredibly impressive. So I'm not knocking it, but there's room for improvement, let's just say. I really wanted to use this spotted headband it generated as it was such high quality, but it just looked too modern. So again, I went back to the painted version. As my final step, I brought the image into Stable Diffusion one last time as I really wanted to get the earrings a little closer to the original painting. They're still not perfect, but I feel they're reasonably close, and somewhere between looking too painted and looking too modern. With a few more general tweaks, we were done. With this video, aside from demonstrating my methods, I really wanted to show that AI can be a part of your regular workflow as a creative. It not only can massively speed up your process, but also allow you to undertake projects that may have not been possible without it. I'd certainly love to hear your thoughts about it all below. Away from AI, if you're interested in my manually colorized historical images, I have a link to my store below where you can purchase wall prints, stickers, fridge magnets and so on. It's a great way to support this channel and get a fantastic gift for the history lovers in your life at the same time. Thanks for watching!